Check, mic check. Check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder, and I have invited you here today to have a little heart-to-heart conversation. Now, this may be difficult to hear, so sit down. Take a deep breath. Your podcast might be a little boring. What? Gasp! There's no way, you say defensively. My podcast can't be boring. I plan out important topics to talk about in advance. We have the most amazing guests on the show. We have an awesome editor, and we have listeners. I see the numbers in the podcast stats from my podcast host. How dare you call my podcast boring? Listen, it's nothing personal. But just because you see some numbers on the screen in your podcasting host stats doesn't mean that your audience is really listening to each episode all the way through and engaging in a way that moves them to take the desired action. Remember all those calls to action that you put at the ends of your episodes? And it certainly doesn't mean that they love your show so much that they're telling other people in their circle about it in conversation. I'm not saying that you're doing a bad job at podcasting, not at all. I simply want you to consider a few ways that you could make your show even better, i.e., more effective. And by the way, this episode is going to be part one of what is going to be a two-part exploration of exactly how to do that. So let's start by forgetting about being a podcaster, a show host, a thought leader, or even an expert in your field for a moment. I want you to imagine yourself as your listener. When you have, not you, but you, the listener, when you have some free time in your day to consume content, what do you choose and why? Do you take out your phone, open your podcast app, and look for a show to listen to? Or do you scroll TikTok? Do you turn on Netflix on your TV or YouTube on your computer? Or do you read something? Maybe you're over content for the moment and you really just want to listen to some music. Now, generally speaking, regardless of which answer you gave, you are looking to consume content to either A, learn something new, or B, to be entertained. And the data backs this up. This isn't just me saying like people love to listen to podcasts or consume content in order to learn and be entertained. The data backs this up from Edison Research and the Infinite Dial. In a recent Infinite Dial study, the reasons reported by survey takers for listening to podcasts in the United States were, number one, quote, to learn new things, 74%. Number two, to be entertained, 71%. And then there were other things too, like to stay up to date with the latest topics, to relax, to feel inspired, to escape, for companionship. I would argue that some of those other reasons for listening to podcasts, to relax, to feel inspired, I would say that those are different ways or different byproducts of numbers 1 and 2, to learn new things and to be entertained. So the good news is that of the, at that time, which was a couple of years ago, 26% of Americans who listened to podcasts in the last week, they listened to an average of 8 podcasts throughout the week. And the same report revealed that 35% listen to more than 10 different shows per month. Got that? It's a lot of numbers. And of course, it is a couple of years old, but I will say caveat, a lot of this research is somewhat similar year to year. Like some things kind of fluctuate up or down. During the pandemic, for example, people listened to more podcasts than they do right now. There was a little bit of a spike and then it dipped back down. But generally speaking, these statements still hold true, even if the actual percentages fluctuate a bit. So let's recap. A percentage of podcast fans were listening to an average of 8 podcasts, so 8 episodes throughout the week. And that this could be more than 10 different shows. So not just episodes of the same show, but 10 different shows per month. So that means people are choosing podcasts. It is a medium that has traction that people like to turn to do what? To learn new things and to be entertained. In the 2022 study of the Infinite Dial, in fact, it found that overall, podcast listeners, 67% listened to 1 to 5 episodes per week, 16% listened to 6 to 10 episodes, and 17% listened to 11 or more. And that number skews based on certain demographics. And while Netflix or YouTube may be more entertaining for some folks than listening to podcasts, the research also shows that podcasts have an advantage, or rather a few advantages, over something like Netflix or YouTube. Reasons why podcasts are enjoyable. The prompt was, you enjoy listening to podcasts because ... And the number one response was, quote, you can do other things while listening, 87%. Number 2, they're portable, 80%. And number 3, you can listen wherever you are, 78%. So the reason why somebody might turn to a podcast over another form of media in order to, 1, learn something new, and 2, be entertained is because you can do other things while listening to podcasts. They're portable and you can listen wherever you are. So I want you, as the listener, remember we've got our podcast fan, podcast listener hat on. I want you to consider, what are you doing while you're listening to your favorite podcasts? So if you really are a podcast listener in real life, which I know surprisingly, not all podcast makers are also podcast listeners, but if you are a real podcast listener, if you do actually enjoy listening to podcasts, what are you typically doing while you're listening to those podcasts? And if you're not a regular podcast listener, imagine what you might also be doing while you're listening to a podcast. So I can speak from personal experience. What am I doing when I'm listening to a podcast? I might be driving. I might be somewhere in public waiting with obviously earbuds or headphones. I'm not listening to it out loud. I might be doing household chores like cleaning or putting away laundry or doing the dishes or cooking. I might actually be eating and having a meal while I'm listening to podcasts. I might be doing a certain type of work or emailing. I might be listening to podcasts while I'm in bed falling asleep. I might be listening to podcasts while I'm taking a shower or getting ready for the day. There are any number of activities that I might be doing while I am listening to podcasts. So think about what that might be for you as a listener of your show. This revelation that people are in fact listening to podcasts to do what? Number 1, to learn something new, and number 2, to be entertained, and that they might be choosing podcasts over other forms of media because, why? They can do other things while listening, the podcasts are portable, and they can listen wherever they are. This is fantastic news, but it is also equally important to understand why people don't listen to podcasts, to understand why someone might not choose that. And in the research, it showed that almost 50% of non-podcast listeners say that they don't know where to find them. So that's one problem. It's not the problem that we're going to address today. But others reported being overwhelmed by the number and choice of shows out there. Being overwhelmed by the number and choice of shows out there. So if you ever have gone to your podcast app to look for a new podcast to listen to about a certain topic, then you will know that it's sometimes a little bit like shopping through the bargain basement sale to find the hidden gem, to find exactly what it is that you're looking for. And chances are, if you are actively looking for a new podcast to listen to on a particular topic, it is because you want to, 1, learn something new about that topic, or 2, be entertained, or, well, I'll get to that in a moment. So how do we make sure that the listener is choosing your show over any other podcast that could teach them the same thing? I know. Your content is totally unique. It's different than everyone else's. No one else is teaching what you're teaching or talking about what you're talking about. Except that I promise there are other podcasts that exist covering your same niche. And to the average podcast listener looking in from the outside for a show to listen to about that topic, they may not really know what distinguishes your content from another. So how are we making sure that if they're only listening to 8 episodes per week or 10 shows per month, that your show, your episode is the one that they look forward to showing up in their feed every week, the one that they listen to first when there are 10 new episodes popping up in their feed on Wednesdays, because for some reason, Wednesday seems to be the most popular day for new episodes to arrive in a podcast feed. Is it just me or is it really Wednesdays? I think it might just be me or it might be true. I don't know. But why is it that they are going to listen to your show first and over and over and over again over anybody else's? That's the key. You're going to combine both of the top reasons that somebody listens to a podcast. You are going to teach them something new and you are going to entertain them. Your podcast is going to be both educational and entertaining. And that is what is going to equal an engaging podcast that people want to choose, that they come to over and over again, and that it isn't boring. We have all heard podcasts that are jam-packed full of great information that you could learn a ton from, but you don't look forward to listening to it. You don't see it in your app and say, "Ooh, I can't wait to listen." And you click play immediately before you've even gotten out of bed because it's too boring. It has great information. You should listen to it. You could learn a lot from it, but you're not going to choose it because it's not also entertaining. I mean, why are you listening to me in this moment over any other podcast that you could be listening to about podcasting? There are dozens of podcasts out there that are about how to podcast better, how to do this with your podcast, how to do that with your podcast. Why are you listening to me right now? Is it because I am giving you a very valuable checklist full of information that you can take with you to make your podcast better? Or is it because I am entertaining you while you are learning something new? See how this works? It is a magical formula. I've been thinking a lot more intentionally about social media lately. Like most of us, it's kind of a love-hate relationship, but I'm feeling a teensy bit more experimental because of all the time I've been spending with Lauren Ramsey of Betsy Bash, my favorite social media and digital marketing agency. Lauren and I recently created an integrated podcast and social strategy service called The Creative Bash for podcasters like you who feel like you're spinning your wheels, not growing your show fast enough or consistently enough or sustainably enough, or you recognize that you're simply not getting the engagement and interaction that you want from your audience. You know they're there in theory, but sometimes you feel like you're shouting or podcasting, as it were, into the void. Over the next few episodes of Podcast Envy, you'll hear a brand new segment called the Creative Bash Starter, a quick tip or insight from Lauren and me, mostly Lauren, let's be honest, on aligning your content strategy between channels for a better overall experience. Once you've had a taste and you're ready to see the full menu, head to the show notes for a link to a quick interest form to request an invitation for a Creative Bash virtual tea with Lauren and me. We'll hang out together online for about 20 minutes and see if the Creative Bash is a good fit for you and your amazing show. Hey, Lauren from Betsy Bash.
Hello, hello.
I am a podcaster. I am not a content creator on social media. How can I use the content that I'm already recording for my podcast on social media? Are audiograms the only thing I can do?
Oh, definitely not. So one thing that I think would be really fun and people really like to engage with is what I call swipe collages. So it's uploading multiple images into Instagram and making them connect to each other. Let's say you have a podcast and you have 3 tips about the topic in your podcast today. So you could make a 4-image swipe collage where the first image talks about what you're going to give tips on and tells them to swipe. And then the next 3 are the 3 tips. Another really fun thing that you could do is you could strip the audio and upload it into Instagram and then record a video of you doing what you're talking about, planning what you're talking about, some sort of video that goes along with the audio. Or if you don't want to be on camera, which I understand, you could also shoot like some kind of B-roll type footage that also talks to the topic. Let's say you have a podcast about cold brew. You could either shoot video of you drinking cold brew and loving it, or you could shoot like a lot of different coffee shops and take yourself out of it, but still give people something to look at while they listen to your audio. Or let's say you have a podcast about the great outdoors, right? And like being a woman, getting out into nature and being active and being proud of it no matter where you are in your journey. So you strip some audio from your podcast, you can upload that into Reels, and then you can either record video of you hiking, right? Or you could just record video of nature and of the things that you're seeing on your hike. The idea is you want to have video that matches the audio, but it doesn't necessarily have to feature you. Another fun way, if you are okay being on camera, is you can kind of re-talk about what you talked about on your podcast, right? So let's say you have one concept you really want to break down for people. You can listen to your podcast, then just say that same thing exactly again, either in a reel or on a TikTok, explaining to people what that concept is.
It sounds like making this stuff is like a lot of extra work. How long should these videos be?
Well, that's the fun part. They don't have to be long. People lose interest after 2 seconds. So really, you only have 2 seconds to catch them. So the shorter the video, the better. With anything where you're trying to capture people's attention in video, you want to put the hook first, right? Why should they listen to you? Do you struggle with going out into nature by yourself? Do you struggle with feeling fit enough to go on a hike? Give people a reason to listen and address their problem right away, and then they'll listen to the rest. But if you just start talking and they don't know where you're going, they're going to move on.
So back to me. We were just talking about why you're listening to Podcast Envy with Andrea Klunder, your podcast boss, right now, as opposed to any other podcast you could be listening to about podcasting. Let's take another example from me. But again, we're going to imagine this time that I am not a professional podcast producer. I am your friendly neighborhood super podcast listener. And that is true. I am that. The fact that I'm a super listener means that I listen to way more than 11 episodes of podcasts per week. And I listen to, for sure, more than 10 different shows per month. In fact, I follow dozens of different shows in my app, and I don't listen to every episode of every show, but there are some shows that I do listen to every episode of. Any guesses why those shows I listen to every episode of? It's because I always learn something new and I'm always entertained. Also, a third thing that goes in there, which I've talked about in previous episodes, which is that the audio quality is high. And so that removes a barrier to listening, because there are some shows that are very educational and also entertaining. But when the audio quality is poor and there's a barrier to my enjoyment of receiving that education and entertainment, then that is a reason why it goes down the list and it's not the first one I listen to. So that's a side topic, audio quality. But we're talking about educational and entertaining. How to not make your podcast boring. Okay, so my example of myself, I listen to all these podcasts and I also choose to take action based on the podcasts that I listen to. I often choose to work with someone as a result of listening to their podcast. My current business coach right now, Diane Wingert, I chose her partly because she has a great podcast, The Driven Women Entrepreneur, that I've talked about before. And that is one of the reasons why I am now paying her to coach me in my business. Even though there are tons of great business coaching podcasts out there with lots of information, and there are tons of great business coaches out there who don't have a podcast, I chose Diane partly because she has a podcast. It is educational and it is entertaining and the audio quality is good. I also love to learn new things through podcasts. In fact, recently I bought my first condo and joined the HOA board. That's the homeowners association for my condo building. I have no idea how homeowners associations work. I have no idea how to work with a management company. I certainly have no idea how to be the treasurer of a board. And so what did I do? I immediately opened my podcast app and started searching for podcasts for board members for HOAs so that I could learn how to be an effective board member. First of all, there is a dearth of podcasts on this topic. So if you are someone who can help HOAs become more effective from the owner and the board perspective, not from the property management company perspective, you could be one of very few podcasts in this niche. And also, I will say you have a very good chance of being the best one because a lot of the shows I did find were boring. Yes, they were. The topics looked good. It looked like what I wanted to learn. But when I started to listen, in some cases, the audio quality was bad. In some cases, the host's voice was kind of monotone and boring. In some cases, it wasn't well edited. In some cases, I don't know. I was like, this feels like research instead of entertainment. And while I do want to learn, I don't want it to feel like hard work. I want it to be fun and entertaining. I did find one podcast that is fun and entertaining. I said was because it's no longer being produced. So I was only listening to back catalog episodes because there are no new episodes. But it was actually entertaining. And I can talk more about that in the second part of this 2-part series on Is Your Podcast Boring? Because there are some really specific reasons why that was the only podcast that I actually listened to multiple episodes of that I found the most useful. I am always looking for shows, listening to shows for my own personal use and also professionally. I am constantly stumbling across podcasts produced by organizations, companies, and brands that I love. And I get so excited when I see a podcast on behalf of an organization I love. And then I listen to it and it's boring. It's not as good as it could be. And there are a few reasons why. There is a key in the research, in the data, as to how to make sure that your podcast is entertaining. And that key is that around 3/4 of podcast listeners enjoy a particular podcast, quote, for particular hosts, end quote. For particular hosts. The host is the reason they enjoy the podcast and not the content, not the information, not what they learn from it, not the theme music, the host. Now, you may say, whoa, I'm not a celebrity. Fear not. You don't need to be a celebrity in order to be an engaging podcast host. In fact, hot take, most celebrities are not great podcast hosts, but that's another topic for another day. Let's take a look at the sector of personal finance, one of my favorite types of podcasts to listen to. How many personal finance podcasts are out there full of great information where you could learn a ton and become so much more proficient with your personal finances? How many? I don't know. Probably hundreds, maybe, of personal finance podcasts. I listen to certain ones. And the reason why I have chosen the ones that I listen to are, want to guess? Because of the host. It's not to do with how long they are. Some are like 20 minutes long on average. Some are closer to an hour average. Some have this perspective or that perspective. the reason why I listen to the personal finance podcasts that I choose to listen to is because of the hosts. Now, if you want to do a little reconnaissance yourself and see if you can figure out what it is about a particular host or what a great podcast host does to make their show not only educational, but also entertaining, here are 3 of my favorite personal finance podcasts that I listen to almost right away when they come out, definitely within the first 24 to 48 hours of a new episode. They're at the top of my queue. Money with Katie, So Money with Farnoosh Torabi, and Afford Anything with Paula Pant. So take a listen to those 3 podcasts, Money with Katie, So Money, and Afford Anything, and see if you can figure out before the next episode of Podcast Envy what those hosts are doing that is different from other personal finance hosts. Now, I'm not saying that there are no other personal finance podcasts that are great, because there are some others that are in my queue. They're just not the ones that always rise to the top. They're kind of like the second string. And then there's a ton of personal finance podcasts that I've never even listened to. So if your favorite isn't on that list, please don't be offended. But I would love to see if you could listen to those shows and figure out what it is that you think that they're doing or what it is about those hosts that makes them rise to the top of my queue specifically. And then you will know why I, as an ideal audience member, may be choosing to listen to them. You want some hints? All right, I've got 4 hints for you. Relatability, voice, storytelling, humor. I know it sounds like I just gave you the answers, but I didn't. I encourage you to listen to some of their episodes and see how they are using those 4 things and why I picked them out. If you want to make sure that your podcast is not boring, you need it to be both educational and entertaining. You can no longer afford to make it an either-or proposition. If you do, you're missing out on engagement, growth, and impact opportunities with your audience. Now that you know the problem and you know the formula, education plus entertainment equals engagement, or put another way, people will choose to listen to your podcast when they can, 1, learn something new, and 2, be entertained. On part 2 of this Podcast Envy series, we are going to explore 1,001 ways to make your podcast more entertaining and make sure it is not boring. Maybe not 1,001, because that would really take a long time, but a bunch of different ways. And then you will be able to sort through that list of ideas and figure out what is going to work best for you, for your personality, your approach, your brand, your style, whatever it is, because you don't have to do it the same ways that I do it, or the same ways that Katie from Money with Katie does it, or the same ways that Farnoosh from So Money does it, or whatever. There are different approaches to bringing some entertainment into your podcast, and we're going to explore that in the next episode. Now, if you don't want to wait that long and you're like, this is a problem that needs to be solved right now for my podcast, here are a couple of things that you can do. Number 1, you can sign up for the next Podcast Envy Masterclass on Friday, April 21st at 11:30 a.m. Central Time on Zoom, all about podcast hosting like a pro. Again, this is one of the top ways to make sure that your show is more entertaining and is being chosen by listeners above other shows in your niche or in your field. You can sign up for this class at thecreativeimposter.com/masterclasses. And we're going to be featuring the fantastic Karen Yates of Wild and Sublime. Wild and Sublime is one of our podcast clients. And Karen has experience not only as a podcast host, but she also has a background in theater, very similar to me. She has experience as an MC for live events, as a presenter, as a director, as a writer, as an actor. She's got it all, and she's going to be bringing her perspective mixed with my perspective on ways that you can bring these skills and improve them in your podcast hosting experience. So again, that's Friday, April 21st at 11:30 a.m. Central, thecreativeimposter.com/master classes. And there is a promo code. You can get 50% off your master class with the promo code VIP invite. So that is opportunity number 1. And then opportunity number 2, if you want personalized support, if you are like, oh my God, my podcast might be boring, what do I do? Engage with me directly for a Podcast Envy refresh. We'll take a look and a listen in depth to your podcast, your brand, what it is that you're trying to do. We'll discuss all of your goals and objectives and dreams and vision. I'll get a feel for what your strengths are as a podcast host that we can capitalize that might be going underused in your show. And we will create an action plan for you with some coaching and accountability. Book a 20-minute complimentary consultation with me at thecreativeimposter.com T420. That's T like the thing that you sip when you're having a casual conversation in the afternoon with someone. thecreativeimposter.com/TEAFOR20, T for 20, because we're going to have a virtual tea date online for 20 minutes. And I'm not going to do all of that I just said in 20 minutes. No. This call is a chance to see if and how we can work together to make sure that your podcast is indeed not boring. If you have any comments or any feedback about this episode, if you think that I'm right, or if you think that I'm wrong, or if you are curious to learn more, email me, Andrea@thecreativeimposter.com. I do read and respond to my own emails. And so if you send me some feedback and you want to make it public and include your name and your podcast name, I might even read it on the next episode and shout you out. So there you go. That's how you can engage and participate in Podcast Envy. It's a good thing I decided to make this 2 parts, because originally I was going to do everything all in one episode, and that would have been a very long solo episode. So I broke it up into 2 because I'm thinking about you. All right. I think we've reached the end. We've reached the end of part 1, but it is only the beginning, because we want to make sure that no, in fact, your podcast is not boring. Your podcast is the one that people are going to choose when they are looking to, 1, learn something new about the topic or the niche that you're in, and 2, be entertained. That's coming up on part 2 of this series on Podcast Envy. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Imposter Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.